Hi friends, and welcome back. It's Mrs. Vincent with another chapter in our A to Z Mysteries, the School Skeleton. And I left you off with chapter 4 the last time, where the kids have drafted letters to send to the remaining teachers on their list. And I say teachers, but really they're kind of suspects, people that they think might be responsible for stealing Mr. Bones. So we're going to jump right back into chapter 5. The next morning, they met in front of the school before the first bus showed up. There were only a couple of cars in the teacher's parking lot. "I hope Mrs. Waters isn't late today," Josh said as they entered the school. "We need to get those notes in the mailboxes before the teachers get here." They hurried along the silent hallway to the principal's office. Mrs. Waters was just taking off her coat. "Mr. Dillon isn't in yet," she said when the kids walked in. "We came to see you," Dink said. "Well, isn't that nice?" the secretary said, flipping a page on her calendar. "Goodness, where did March go already? Now, how can I help you, friends?" What she means by that is time seems to be going really quickly. Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose explained their idea. "You honestly think one of our teachers took that skeleton?" she asked. "We don't know," Dink said, "but the footprint looks like an adult's. Would you mind putting these in the right mailboxes?" He handed Mrs. Waters the 8 notes they'd printed. She read one and smiled. "Of course I will," she said, "and I wish you luck finding Mr. Bones. I know Mr. Dillon will be happy to have this mystery solved." Mrs. Waters stood up, walked to the teachers' mailboxes, and placed the notes in 8 different slots. The kids thanked her and left. Just then, the bell rang, and the students began rushing through the front door. They walked to their room and found Mrs. Eagle at her desk. My, look who's eager to get started," she said. The word eager, and every time I stop for one of these vocabulary words, eager is a little bit of a more challenging word. But I try to give you a word that is a little bit simpler for a kid, but know that it is a synonym. So she says, look who's eager to get started. If you're really eager about something, it means you're like excited and ready to go. So you are eager first thing on Christmas morning to get out of bed super duper fast to get downstairs would be my bet for those who celebrate Christmas. But you might not be as eager to go and get your flu shot. It's not something that you kind of look forward to quite as much. Eager means really excited and enthusiastic, ready to go. So she thinks the kids are eager just to get started with school, but it's really because they wanted to start this plan of theirs. Once more, the kids explained about the footprint, the 8 notes, and their plan for finding the person who took the school skeleton. They showed her Josh's drawing of the footprint. "And you plan to ask each teacher if you can measure his or her foot?" Mrs. Eagle asked, grinning. "That footprint is our only clue," Ruth Rose said. "We want our class to win the tickets," Josh said. Mrs. Eagle smiled. "All right, if the teachers agree, you 3 may leave the room later," she said. The morning seemed to last forever. Dink kept glancing at the clock, and Josh kept sighing and fidgeting at his desk. Fidgeting like playing with his hands. So again, they're eager to get started with this plan. They're really ready to go. So they keep looking at the clock, and the time just seems to be dragging. Finally, during math, a 5th grader came into the room and handed Mrs. Eagle a stack of papers. She looked through the stack, then called Dink up to her desk. "Here are your responses," she whispered. "All 8 have checked yes. You might as well go now, and good luck." Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose quietly left the room. They brought with them 8 sheets of drawing paper, a ruler, Josh's footprint sketch, and Ruth Rose's list of teachers' names. "Guys, I just thought of something," Ruth Rose said in the hallway. "Whoever made that footprint yesterday might be wearing different shoes today." "You're right," Dink said. "So anyone whose shoe is about the right size will ask if they wore the same shoes yesterday. So if you wore a size 10 today, you probably wore a size 10 yesterday. So they might not be the same exact pair of shoes, but they'll at least be able to narrow it down by size, not necessarily style today." They started walking down the hall. On one classroom door, someone had hung a sign. It said, "Come home, Mr. Bones. We miss you." There was a drawing of a skeleton under the words. 3 girls wearing skeleton masks scampered down the hallway. "Mr. Bones, where are you?" one of the girls said. The other 2 laughed at their friend. Everyone seems excited about this mystery. Outside the 5th grade room, a paper skeleton hung from the ceiling. "The whole school is looking for this skeleton," Josh muttered. "We have to find it first." "Then we'd better get going," Ruth Rose said. "Maybe no one else knows about the footprint yet." First on her list was Mrs. Alavicki, the kindergarten teacher. They showed her Josh's drawing and asked if she would let them trace her left foot. "Of course," Miss Alavicki said, smiling, "but I can already tell you that that foot is a lot bigger than mine." The little kids giggled as Josh traced around her foot on a piece of paper. Outside in the hall, Josh compared it with his drawing. "It's definitely not her," he said. "Miss Alavicki's foot is only 7 inches long." Ruth Rose drew a big X in front of her name on the list. After her name, she wrote, "Too small." They went next door and peeked into Mr. Diodato's 1st grade class. The tall teacher was writing on the chalkboard, "Who stole the school skeleton?" Dink knocked, and Mr. Diodato looked up. "We have visitors, class," he said, grinning. While Josh traced Mr. D's sneaker onto a sheet of paper, the 1st graders gathered round. So you can see that this is their plan. He puts his foot down on there, and then one of them comes around and traces over their foot, and they have a little bit of an audience watching. All the 1st graders kind of coming around to watch. Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose thanked Mr. D and left. In the hall, Josh measured what he had traced onto the paper. Mr. D's sneaker was almost 13 inches long. The bottom tread had little squares, not zigzags. "Cross him off too," Dink said. Ruth Rose put an X by Mr. D's name and wrote, "Too big." 6 more names to go, Josh said, glancing at Ruth Rose's list. "What if it's none of them?" "It must be someone on this list," Dink said. "How could a stranger sneak into the school and walk out with a skeleton?" One by one, the kids traced teacher's shoes onto paper and measured them. They compared the tracings with Josh's drawing. One by one, Ruth Rose put X's next to the names. With only one more name to go, Ruth Rose's list looked like this. And here is the list of all of their names, and they've all got X's through them for various reasons. So most of them are either too big or too small. The 4th grade teacher wasn't there on Monday, so it says absent Monday. Mr. Dillon, the principal, was wearing loafers on Monday, so he got crossed off the list. And the only name left on the list is the gym teacher, Mr. Palmer. Not one of these people could have made that footprint, Ruth Rose said. "Who's the last name?" Dink asked. "Mr. Palmer, the gym teacher," she answered. Josh crossed his fingers. "Maybe he's the one," he said. They found Mr. Palmer sitting behind his desk. He smiled when the kids walked into his office. "I read your note," he said. "Thanks for seeing us," Dink said. "May we measure your shoes?" Mr. Palmer grinned, smiled. Another synonym. "Sure, but I guarantee I didn't steal that skeleton yesterday morning. I was in the emergency room at the hospital." He stood up and held out his left foot. There was a white cast on it. "I slipped on some ice getting into my car yesterday," he said. He pointed to a pair of crutches leaning in a corner. "I can hardly carry my lunch, let alone a skeleton." So, the last name on that list can now be crossed off. So we are no closer to solving our mystery of the missing Mr. Bones, and we're out of names. We're out of clues. We're kind of at a sticking point right now. So you can make any prediction you like, but right now we don't have a whole lot to go on. We're going to need another clue. Until next time, friends.